Hello, and welcome to the weekly LaRouche Organization Battle Report. I'm Michelle Aaron, your host, and today is Wednesday, February 5th. As the world reacts to the Trump announcement that the United States is going to somehow take over Gaza, the LaRouche movement is not reacting, is not commenting. We are organizing. We are organizing for the Oasis Plan and for a new paradigm for mankind. Don't react, lead. For those who've been following the ongoing organizing in Washington, D.C. and around the country to get Tulsi Gabbard and Kash Patel successfully installed in the Trump administration, we'll have a report for that at the end of this program. But we're going to start with a wonderful interview discussion by the founder of the Schiller Institute, Helga Zepp-LaRouche, this afternoon with former CIA analyst Larry Johnson and a real patriot as well. Let's take a look.
The world has watched this genocide going on now for 15 months. Yeah. And, I mean, I was really astonished that Trump could say, all these poor people, they should not go back to this area which is completely destroyed. They should have a better life. I mean, he didn't say with one word of why this part of the world is so utterly destroyed. And it was, among other things, not only Israeli action, but it was US weapon supply and backing up Israel in front of the International Criminal Court of Justice, basically without the backing of the United States in the US Security Council, where the US was vetoing every time there was an effort to remedy the situation, this could not have happened. And the whole world knows that. I mean, I'm really concerned that, unless there is really a dramatic change, which does do justice to the Palestinians, both in Gaza, but also in the West Bank. And, there is the short-term tragedy, but there is also the long-term effect, because I have picked up in the last months increasingly from countries from the global South that the honor and the reputation of the collective West has suffered tremendously, especially because of that attitude in respect to what happened in Gaza. And I'm afraid that if President Trump just now thinks he can build a Riviera in Gaza, taking what you're saying, that it's not very likely to happen, but that will just add to the disgust of the world. And I think all the neighbors already rejected it before it even was coming to a point of decision. I mean, also, if you think that what Trump is doing in respect to migrants at the Mexican border, which is rough treatment, people were rounded up, shipped in handcuffs to their respective countries. I mean, not exactly a nice picture, which is also registered in the world. And then he assumes that the Egyptians and the Jordanians, they just should take migrants. Doesn't he consider that they have a security concern as well? I would like to hear your views on that.
Oh yeah, no, he's ignoring that. I find it difficult to say that he's ignorant of it, because I think one of the errors that the critics of Trump make is they always try to describe him as stupid, shallow, and if he's stupid and shallow, he beat the entire Democrat establishment and got elected, and he held off U.S. law enforcement when the politicization and weaponization of the Department of Justice. So I give him credit for not being some sort of shallow, ignorant person. That said, he is a terrible public speaker in terms of he never really speaks about his philosophy, his vision, with any kind of does not demonstrate intellect on that front. It's very simple. It's MAGA, and he's going to make America great again, regardless of what that entails. But once in a while he slips out with the truth, just like about a week ago when he acknowledged that Russia had a legitimate complaint about NATO creeping up on its borders, and admitting that the United States, if that was happening to us in the United States, we'd react the same. Okay, that sends a good message to Russia. But when it comes to the issue of the Palestinian people, I think Trump is intellectually predisposed to embrace the Zionist vision, and yet he brings to it. He's sort of there's an element of pragmatism from his standpoint of, well, let's just get these people someplace where they'll have a nice place to live, and then they'll be happy. Yeah, which is, shows he understands nothing about the Palestinian people, that they're not a mass lump of clay to be molded as he sees fit. That it's a very, it has had a rich and diverse culture, and there are still Christians among the Palestinians. It's not just a Muslim movement, as it is oft portrayed here in the West, in the United States. So Trump, what ultimately drives him, though, is he wants to be liked, and he wants to do the big deal.
I think that the potential to inject new ideas is absolutely there, because a lot of the, as you say, a lot of the policies will crash against the wall because they're not realizable, and then there is an option for something new. We from the Schiller Institute keep pushing the Oasis Plan, which is right now being considered by very important forces from the Middle East, who basically see the joint economic development of the entire region, from India to the Mediterranean, from the Caucasus to the Gulf, as one region. That is the only way to go. So I think that this potential to have a two-state conference in the UN, which will take place in June in New York. I think if a lot of discussion can occur on the Oasis Plan between now and then, and I don't want to bet, but I would make a really strong hope, backed up by action, that we will be able to get this Oasis Plan on the table, because it is what makes sense. And so what is your take on that?
Well, I'm sad to report I've not read the plan, so I would like to read it so I could comment more fully on it. But what I do know from the kind of work that you associate yourself with and that you invest your time in, they are activities designed to promote a better world and to promote peace, not to promote death and destruction. And on that front, I'm all in favor. We've it's almost like the West has become a death cult, that we can just step on people and end their lives without any thought. We've it's sort of built into our pop culture. We celebrate what we did in World War II, even though this massive bombing of cities in Germany and in Japan, that didn't bring an end to the war. All that did was kill civilians. And we sort of, in essence, normalized the killing of civilians in that war, and it's become something that we tolerate and accept. So we need to move away from that. We need to, I'm a firearms instructor, and I teach people self-defense. And the only time you can ever draw your gun is when your life is an imminent threat and you kill the threat that you face. You don't get to just shoot the threat and then shoot everybody else. But unfortunately, the West, in its approach, tends to kill everybody, and then we'll sort out who was good and bad after the fact. That's got to stop. In fact, that's one of the sort of the puzzling things that drives the West crazy about Russia, because Putin's army has been very, very careful about avoiding civilian casualties, not killing civilians. And when you compare that in contrast to what Israel, the Zionists, have done to the Palestinians, the slaughter, right now the official number stands at 61,000. And there are other estimates that once they recover all the bodies under the rubble, it's well over 120,000. But, it says something about, do you value human life? And I know that what the Schiller Institute stands for is valuing human life.
So we encourage you to watch this interview in its entirety. It is a fantastic discussion and analysis and ideas on what is the situation around the world and what are our potentials in it, including the question of optimism, whether we can expect, whether it is possible to bring the United States out of its darkness and back to its best traditions and to a process of international cooperation and development. On the question of optimism, of scientific optimism, we're now going to bring to you a report from Jason Ross, a long-term leader in the LaRouche Movement science team, on a laser-like intervention that he's involved in making on this question of the mind and the ideas necessary to create a new paradigm for humanity.
Hi, I'm Jason Ross, and I just led a 4-part series of classes on one of the most important scientific discoveries of all time, one that refined our idea of what a scientific principle even is. This was the 17th century discovery by Pierre Fermat that light follows the path of least time. The series of classes brought together more than 50 people to go through Fermat's works and the writings of his contemporaries, friends, and enemies, which I translated in full for the first time into English. This book, The Battle for Light, Fermat versus Descartes, was the basis of this series of classes. And by working together, we had really excellent interactions, and we all learned more through the social process. There's something special that happens when you're in dialogue that you don't get when you're working on things only by yourself. So what was the problem Fermat solved? He looked at light refraction, the way that light bends when it goes from one medium to another. Now, before Fermat, René Descartes, who is vastly overhyped, said that he figured it out. And he gave an explanation based on tennis balls and tennis rackets and the canes used by blind people to walk around. It made no sense. Fermat came up with his own hypothesis. He said that light slows down when it goes into water, and the reason that it bends the way that it does is so that from where it began to where it ended, there was no faster path it could have taken than the one that it actually did. So, what does that mean? Does nature have an intention of getting somewhere quickly? Does light have an intention? What is the role of intention in knowledge? This was extremely controversial at the time, and I think it remains controversial today, even though the general expression of Fermat's discovery, today called the universal principle of least action or stationary action, today this is the most universal of all physical principles, and it began with Fermat. So let me just leave with a quote from Lyndon LaRouche, who assigned this project to me quite some years ago, and he compared it to the Plato cave story. So Plato has a discussion where he contrasts the difference between what our senses know versus what our mind knows. And he asked people to imagine a cave where there are people sort of chained up against a wall. They can only look straight ahead. And behind them, there's a fire, and there are various objects passing in front of the fire that cast shadows on the wall. Plato, his point is that our sense experiences are like seeing shadows on this irregular wall cast by a flickering fire, as opposed to the reality of what's causing those shadows to occur. So LaRouche, speaking about this on the subject of economic animations, he said, the prerequisite for competent use of statistical animations is learning to think as Kepler did in his use of gravitation for his uniquely original discovery of the universal principles of gravitation, and of Fermat's experimental discovery of that principle of quickest time, which, together with the central discoveries of Kepler, underlie all competent modern thought about physical processes, including national economies. So I encourage you to join in with our efforts to expand the discovery process, to have social interactions based on what it is that we all share in common, the universality of the human species, to get a better understanding of what it is that creativity is, what it does, and thereby a better understanding of what our potential future as a species can be.
Thank you, Jason. And we have in the video description a link where you can pick up a copy of Jason's book, The Battle for Light, Fermat versus Descartes. Coming back to a little more of the political predicates of the moment, we have a brief word from LaRouche Organization President Diane Sayre. She's replying to a X communication this morning from Donald Trump that said, I want Iran to be a great and successful country, but one that cannot have a nuclear weapon. Reports that the United States, working in conjunction with Israel, is going to blow Iran into smithereens are greatly exaggerated. I would much prefer a verified nuclear peace agreement, which will let Iran peacefully grow and prosper. We should start working on it immediately and have a big Middle East celebration when it is signed and completed. God bless the Middle East. To which Diane replies, this is good news. It will work well with a two-state Israel-Palestine solution based on massive economic development as seen in the LaRouche Oasis Plan. I don't think Gaza real estate takeover by the United States is going to go over. Okay, so there's an intervention on the social media domain. So now I'm very happy to go to a contribution from a member of the Danish LaRouche movement.
My name is Faride Gillesberg. I work with the Schiller Institute and the LaRouche movement, which is the same actually, here in Denmark. And a short report from our activities from overseas is that I was invited to a conference in Vienna, which was a conference of a special character because it was on the harmony among religions and cultures as a precondition for world peace, which is very important because these days the talk about peace we hardly find in the public debate. This conference was organized actually by an organization called Universal Peace, which invited me to attend, and there were maybe around 200 attendees, and the presentations were really inspiring because it had the character of, how do we use religion as a weapon for creating peace and bringing people together. The dialogue among, Islam and Christianity, it has been very beautiful. There were politicians, there were a lot of diplomats, there were normal people and people who are interested in these issues. And I was then represented as the Schiller Institute, I was a representative of the Schiller Institute as a participant in this conference and got the possibility during the question and answer session to introduce myself and to put up the question on the possibility of the ceasefire in Gaza, in the Middle East, in East Gaza, about should we not use the ceasefire as quick as possible to get economic development projects going, to get development going as a whole, water projects like the Sheila Institute has put out with the Oasis Plan. The answers were not concrete answers to this question because they try to limit it on the issue of religions and dialogue among religion and culture. But I got the possibility to talk with a lot of attendees and give out the 10 principles of Helga Zepp-LaRouche in form of a flyer, and the same with the Oasis Plan. I got a lot of feedback. And I must say, the most exciting was actually at the end when people were going, out, because I really had a lot of discussions. And then I just overheard somebody said to somebody else, she's from the Schiller Institute. I have to talk to her, something like that. And then I said, okay. And then I got, he got my attention. I said, okay, who's saying that? And I went to him, and then he said, was really exciting to hear that the Schiller Institute is here. And then we got a very nice discussion. And then it showed that he has been following Helga Zepp-LaRouche's discussions every week for some while. And he said, this is the best organization with serious analysis, we have a common ground on the view of, of man, on the view of the strategic situation.
Thank you, Farida. And really wonderful that this conference had a coming together around beautiful ideas of mankind. So now let's take a look at the ongoing election campaign in Germany, where a slate of Buzo LaRouche candidates are on the ballot for the February 23rd election. This last weekend, in rather cold weather, our candidates and activists and organizers went out and were putting up signs throughout Berlin. So here we see candidate Jonathan Tron there with a sign that means cooperation with the BRICS. Vote out the warmongers. Here's another candidate, Stefan Ossenkopf, and an activist with another beautiful sign, which means in English, Berlin and BRICS, peace through development. And you see that beautiful dove. And we'll just check out a couple more of these. There's another candidate, Klaus Fimmen. And I think we have one more here. So you see these beautiful signs going up very high up on these poles throughout many neighborhoods throughout Berlin. Very good. So back in the United States, we have a short report from a veteran organizer of the LaRouche movement who went out to a campus in the state of Texas, a large major campus that has 45,000 students, and he'll explain what they were speaking to these students about.
Good day, everyone. This is Joe reaching out to you from Houston. We've been here on a campus in Greater Houston today, talking to hundreds and hundreds of citizens about the immediate battle in the U.S. Congress, which we're happy to say that after getting out hundreds of leaflets and targeting some phone calls, we did actually get the good news that Tulsi Gabbard's nomination has passed out of committee to the full body of the U.S. Senate. And a lot of these students, everything we were saying was very new to them. But the larger message we were giving to people is that the U.S. mission in the world is not to be the propagator of constant war, of bailouts, of economic oppression, but that we should work with the BRICS nations, we should work with China on a grand mission for Palestine to green the desert, and rediscover our national identity as Americans, participating in the development of the world and bring an end to the legacy of the British Empire in America forever. So reporting from Houston, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Joe. And I think that says it all. We're going to leave you now with our final report from last week's organizing in Washington, D.C., where we had a large crew meeting with various Senate offices and doing organizing. And this report will be from candidate in the Bronx, Jose Vega, congressional candidate, and activist Kynan Thistlethwaite.
I just wanted to, of course, I was in the hearing today with Kynan. We were both in the hearing. Now, what was the most important thing, though, was what we did yesterday before we were actually in the hearing. This was the same day that the Kennedy hearings were happening. What that allowed us to do was to go to every building in the Senate, and nearly every senator's office received a packet of the Liars Bureau, Dennis Kucinich's statement, and other material that we had hanging, were going around. Now, there were a total of about 25 of us or so. And these people ranged all the way from New York, in my case, New Jersey. We had people from Northern Virginia, and we had people as far as North Carolina who came just for this day. And that actually had a very profound effect because we tried to diversify. We had 3 teams. We tried to diversify the teams as to from where they came from. And there was a particularly funny interaction where we walked into Senator Lindsey Graham's office. Now, I had heard that Lindsey Graham may have been a potential holdout, but we walked into Senator Lindsey Graham's office and you see all these staffers that look like Barbie's dolls, right? Both in how they look, but also in their heads, because there's really nothing going on there. They just look at you with these blank faces. But we walked in there and we had this, my team had 6 people, 7 people on it. We walk in there and we're like, I say, look, we're a contingent of Americans made up from different parts of the country. There's North Carolina right there. There's New York, New Jersey, and this guy came all the way from Maryland. So that, I tried to get some laughs, but like I said, they're like plastic. I gave them the material and I said, I need you to get this to the person who is advising the senator, whether it's judicial, whether it's intel for both Cash and for Tulsi Gabbard. And they were freaked out, to say the least, the staff in that specific office. Now, that's not exactly qualitative of every Senate office, because I would say 85% of the offices in the Senate that we visited were extremely receptive to what we were doing. We had some very kind staffers who assisted us, and we even had meetings with aides who were doing their best to listen to what we had to say. In fact, we had a funny sort of situation happen with one of our North Carolina people who I said, let's go to your representative office. You just drove up 6 hours to get here, demand to see somebody. And that carried a lot of weight because there were 2 people there. There was 2 staffers. There was one staffer who was just trying to work with us. And then there was another staffer who was being kind of mean. And, I said, just play up the fact that you drove 6 hours, right? And the one staffer who was being kind of mean was like, well, these meetings are sought after, they're hard to get. There's a long waiting list when Senate's in session. But the other staffer's like, actually, I'm just going to go see if there's someone in the back that you can talk to right now. You drove up 6 hours. See, that stuff works, right? You have to tell these people what you did and that you mean business, because that's actually what works. And that was what was effective about going around the Senate, was that it wasn't just, the same people that we had last week. It was like, well, wait a minute. People from around the country are driving in for this day, the day before the hearing, because they want me to get this material to my advisor, or they want me to talk to my boss about this or that. Okay, it adds a dimension of seriousness where they have to take you seriously. They did not treat us just like any other group coming in here. We did get the respect that we deserve because of our presence there. Another thing I would just want to report, and then I'll end off the kind of short report here. Nearly every senator's office where the phones, I could see the phones, especially if they were Republican or part of some intel committee, there were like 6, 7 caller IDs within a minute. So there were lots of people just calling in. And I asked the guy, I was like, I just saw like 6 numbers go by. Do you need to take that? And he said, oh, no, we turned the sound off because it's just, it's loud and it's been going off all day. So we just kind of let it ring without a sound. Right. See, so clearly there has been an activation of a mobilization of people around these 3 nominations. We saw it all day yesterday and today. And today, when I went to the hearing, the room was packed. Now, there were all kinds of characters in there, but there were a lot of people there. I saw some people wearing the I don't know what the formal name of it is, but it's the Hawaiian flower necklace. There were people wearing that. There were
The
people.
lei.
There you go. Thank you. There were a lot of people there who were, they did like an impromptu rally in front of her office around 8 in the morning, not in front of her office, in front of the Senate committee room at 8 in the morning. People were pumped and people were there since like 7 a.m. to get into the room, and it really, the energy, the difference between what's going on now in the last 4 years is that people feel like they can actually change something. Right. Nobody feels like they can actually sit back and watch things. No, people feel like they have to be more involved than they ever were in the last 4 years. That's what's actually changed under this administration and with these confirmations, is that you get the sense that people want to be involved in shaping, not because they think Trump's going to do everything they want, but because they actually think they can change something. And you know what? They're right. They're absolutely right. So, that's the kind of energy we brought yesterday and today. So I'll stop there.
Okay, very good. Let's see if we can get Kynan up if he has a comment on what, same thing. Hi.
Yeah, hi. So yeah, just to add to what Jose said, there was a lot of energy coming from our group of people. There were about 25 to 30 person delegation that was at Washington, D.C. yesterday. People came from New York City. People came from North Carolina, pretty much all over the country to join us in this. And really, the LaRouche organization has been really the one spearheading these 2 nominations to blow up the deep state apparatus. And, they're not perfect by any means, but what people have to understand that with this new administration, things are transitioning. There's a big potential for change, and we should really be joyful and organizing to make sure that we actually get the truth, that there's actually integrity in the intelligence community. Anya Parampil actually had a pretty good title for what transpired in the hearing today. It was Tulsi Gabbard versus the unintelligent community. So I think that goes to what the title of this program is today, to make the America intelligent again. I had a lot of insights actually on the hearing itself, and I was really excited by it actually, because the pressure on Gabbard is very obvious, and she has to carefully word what she says to make sure that, that her nomination will actually go through. But, a lot of pressure was on her for her defense of Edward Snowden in the past, the NSA whistleblower who brought to light all the violations that the NSA was committing against Americans and the violations of the Fourth Amendment. But she, had said that he had broken the law, but he had brought out documents which showed that there were violations going on, and that's undeniable. And yet, these senators, they kept going after her. It was like, they asked her like 6, 7, or 8 times, can you say that Edward Snowden is a traitor? And she absolutely refused to relent on that question. So I was quite happy with it. And also, the Gray Zone journalist Max Blumenthal had said that really this was the first time that a national audience would have heard what about the dirty regime change war that the U.S. carried out against Syria with Operation Timber Sycamore. So I think that was important. So I think people should listen to the hearing. And I think people should be really excited about this. I mean, there's still, there's still, they still have to vote on her nomination along with Patel's. So there's still plenty of time to organize. There's still plenty of time to call congressmen. And I would just emphasize that everyone take a note and, learn that you can actually do something. Now is not the time to actually stand by, spectate to see if these nominations will go through or not. We actually have a responsibility to make sure that these go through. So I'll just add that to what Jose said.